How's it going, guys? This is the Core 3 from FightingGamesOnline.info. I'm back with another fighting game tips and definitions. This time we're going to talk about reading and conditioning. So hopefully you are starting to approach fighting games in a new light, but are maybe hitting a wall in terms of progressing against certain opponents. At some points you might start wondering if some of your opponents are psychic. And I assure you that it's probably not the case, but you could say they are pretty good at predicting your next move. Getting into the more intermediate and advanced nuances of fighting games means that you'll need to take more risks. Fighting games are sort of like a game of poker where your life bar acts as the poker chips and then certain game mechanics are your hand. Making a decision to attack based on what you think your opponent is going to do is known as a read. In order to make good reads, you'll have to observe your opponent's behavior and the tools they have access to during the match. Do they jump too much? Are they relying on certain attacks a little more than they should? Do they have full meter? Are they looking to use their meter? These are the questions that kind of lead you to making a good read. Another method to making even better prediction comes with conditioning your opponents. And one of the first conditioning strategies we learned back in Street Fighter 2 with Ryu was basically conditioning your opponent to jump by throwing fireballs, right? So, one of the biggest strategies to beating fireballs is timing your jump attack so that it lands during the fireball recovery animation. In this situation, you would have to condition the opponent to commit to a jump attack based on the strategy they used before, except this time you'll not be throwing a fireball, you'll be basically anti-airing them with a shuriken, right? So just to say, just to kind of give you an idea, I'm throwing the fireballs, right? Keep throwing the fireball. And then I guess just he decides to go for some sort of jump attack, right? And that's basically what I want him to do. You know what I'm saying? I'm conditioning him to basically, by throwing the fireball, he's kind of looking to jump over the fireball, right? And that's what he's going to do. He's going to basically jump over the fireball and then catch a DP, right? So that's essentially how conditioning works in a nutshell, right? Is that you just want to continue to do things until you have conditioned them to do something that you want them to do. Conditioning is all about making your opponent believe that you will, or even sometimes you will not do something. You may not have realized this until now, but a lot of what we've discussed in the previous videos can be used to condition your opponent. Like if you recall in the last video, frame traps rely on your opponent believing that they can attack after they have blocked, right? So just remember, I just put them on basically first attack. And that's kind of, frame traps are making you believe that, that the opponent needs to block, right? That second hit, right? Remember, after a while, the opponent knows they're being put into a frame trap, but what they may not realize is that you're conditioning them for different mix-ups depending on the behavior when it comes to defending your attack. So like, as you remember before, essentially what we would do is once you kind of gotten them into, of course, guarding the attack, once they know that they're not going to be able to win on the second hit, you've essentially conditioned them to start looking for this second attack, right? So once you've convinced them to look for the second attack, what do? Right? You start throwing them, right? Or maybe you do something different. Maybe you go for a low or something like that. But, basically you start to create that conditioning so that you can catch an opening, right? A key part of the strategy is not putting all your cards on the table, so to speak. So, for example, say you want to create a high mix-up, right? So if the opponent believes that you'll keep attacking low, then they'll become prone to blocking low, not realizing that they're being conditioned to look for the low attack so that at some point you can start doing high attacks, right? So if they just keep blocking low, right? So I just keep going for a low attack, right? And once I feel like I've got them conditioned into going for low attacks, then I could just start to try and trick them and go for a high attack, or maybe even go for an overhead, of course, which hits crouch guarding opponents, right? This is also the same thing with the right-left mix-ups. Once you've conditioned an opponent to believe that you only want to cross them up, you can then start tripping them up by doing just regular jump attacks or using a bait tool that will trick them into thinking that you're going for the mix-up, leading them to block in the wrong direction, sort of, right? So, like as you remember before, this is kind of a cross-up, right? So once I've convinced them to kind of, after they get knocked down, let me just take this off. Let me, so, you let them to believe after the knockdown, of course, you go for the cross-up. And once you have them convinced that they're kind of, going for the cross-up, you can then switch it and then start going for an actual, just basically going for the regular jump in front of them instead of trying to go for the cross-up. And they might not expect you to go do that, So once again, you're conditioning them to go for cross-ups, right? And then once you have them conditioning to go for the cross-up, oops, messed that one up. Right. Then you just change and then go for the regular attack, right? Go for the regular jump attack, right? Or, if you don't want to go for the cross-up, you can just basically, bait it like you're going to go for the cross-up, go for a throw, So you kind of get the idea, right? Now, of course, you can be conditioned as well. The best way to avoid being conditioned is having character knowledge first and foremost, as it's good to know what conditioning tools an opponent may have at their disposal. But you also want to make your opponent aware that you aren't afraid to take risks, or at least know what they're doing, right? And, basically once you gain experience of, doing this stuff more and more, right? Especially when it comes to doing frame traps, right? What you're going to learn with frame traps is that, after a while you kind of know, or you get to kind of see the change in behavior with somebody in terms of what they're doing, right? So, like eventually they're going to try and maybe go for a throw because, they can only do this. They can only do frame traps and, other things I'll discuss later. They can only do these things, but so much, So if you're defending against it and they know that you're on to them, at some point they have to switch up. And you kind of want to look for that, that pause, that gap in their gameplay, essentially, where they're about to try and go for a throw, or they're trying to do something different. Okay. Bear in mind that some players just cannot be conditioned, which means you have to rely on just good reads and good decisions, and then your reactions to defeat your opponent instead. Well, that's all there is for this video. Take a few matches to put this into practice. Focus on learning your opponent's habits and making reads based on them. Try different types of conditions, even make them believe that they may have the upper hand in some of their decision making on wake-ups especially. Once you feel you have a good understanding of how this works, check out the next video and I'll go over a very important form of conditioning, which is footsies.